Hi, 3DMJers. This is Andrea Valdez, and you are listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. In today's episode, I'm joined by Jeff Alberts and Brad Loomis as we discuss bodybuilding in your 40s. Now, if you are in any other decade besides your 40s, still please do stick around as this episode holds some wisdom for all ages. Both of these gentlemen are what you might consider middle age, but they're also completely in their prime in regards to strength and physique development. I get to ask them what they wish they would have done differently, what they're grateful to have done correctly, and what their years in the gym have taught them in regards to how they want to proceed with their athletic careers. We also make sure to end with their individual advice for athletes who are in their 20s, so just pretty early in their career, and some of the different coaching scenarios that tend to pop up for people who are already in their late 30s and beyond. They talk a lot about the physical and mental tools that have helped them, helped keep them going, keep them trucking on for decades, which is super valuable regardless of age or competitive status. So in short, we'll learn how these dudes stay nimble, mobile, strong, and relevant in a sport where most people cut their careers short or are so impatient they never even get to start one in the first place. So as always, if you have any feedback or comments on this specific episode, you can leave them for us at 3dmusclejourney.com under podcast 41. And here we go, guys. This is Bodybuilding in Your 40s with Brad Loomis and Jeff Alberts. Hey, so this episode's about you guys being in great shape for your age. But I don't like saying that. Y'all are just awesome regardless. Because y'all are at the top of your game in your 40s.
I'm at an advantage.
I'd like to think so. That's a good way to think of it.
I'm at an advantage. I got 30 years of training.
Yeah.
I'm jacked. I'm jacked because of it.
That's true. Can y'all start with how old y'all are currently as we're recording this? Jeff, how old are you?
45.
45. Brad?
Same. Jeff's just a few months older than me.
Okay. And y'all be really nice and excuse that Brad is champing it out with a little bit of a cold right now. So.
Yeah, my apologies.
His nose is talking a little more than usual. Okay. So, 45. Jeff, I like how you started that out saying that you are at an advantage because you have that much training under your belt. And I obviously subjectively am like, it's the best job I've ever been, but it's not a subjective thing. Like, this is, in 2017, going to be the best physique you've brought to the stage to date. Would you agree?
We're not there yet, so let's not put too much pressure on me.
Well, okay, the most muscle that you have had in the prep thus far. Like, you don't plan to be in a weakened state. Like, if you come in the same amount of leanness, you'll be as full as you've ever been.
That's the plan. Yeah.
Okay. I guess I shouldn't say all that.
That's the plan. But, I think I'm saying I'm at an advantage because, obviously, I've been training for a long, long time. And this sport, natural bodybuilding, it's an old man sport. It's not like football, boxing, or something like that where you start creeping into your 30s. It's like you're towards the tail end. But as a natural bodybuilder, I mean, it's proven. You look at all the guys that are at the top, they're 30s, 40s, and even into their 50s.
Yeah. And then, so you've been lifting 30 years, and Brad, about how long? And real quick, Jeff, your thing's pushing on your shirt or something.
My bad.
Oh, no worries. How long have you been training, Brad?
About 20. I think I'm coming up on 20 this year.
Okay. So, do you guys think that decade of difference makes that big of a difference in your physique? Or would y'all argue that it's more of a, genetic advantage in training and all that stuff? Does that make sense?
Between Jeff and I?
Yeah, because y'all are the same age now, but one of you has 10 extra years of weight training.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that we... Go ahead, Brad.
I was going to say, I think it definitely shows for Jeff. I mean, I think that 10 extra years has got a lot to do with why he is so developed and why he is, Jeff Alberts. I mean, regardless of, yes, he does have good genetics. Yes, he does have good symmetry. But, I mean, 10 years, that's that's a lot of years. That's a lot of volume that he's built up. And
it's a lot of time under tension.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's probably, one of the big reasons why Jeff, is probably, really arguably the best bodybuilder out of all of us, really. And it's no coincidence that he's the one that's been at it the longest.
Mm-hmm. And I know what people are going to say, like, as soon as you say, Jeff, I'm at an advantage because I've been doing it for so long. I know at some point in this podcast, or we could even go into it now, what about the people that haven't been doing it as long and are in their 40s? Like, I guess they're going to want to, like, is there hope? Could I ever get there? All that good stuff. I mean, what's the latest you've adopted someone into their training career? Like, say you got someone on your roster, what's the oldest that they've been when you're like, okay, let's start?
Like brand new to weight training?
Yes, structured weight training. Maybe they had activity, but
I can't think of anybody offhand. I know I've had a few that were in later stages. My brother's a good example. He's older than me. He's 50.
Yeah.
And he's still getting in his best shape. Excuse me. He started like structure training and all that. I think he was like 28, 29, closer to 30. And he's had a little over 20 years later, and he still gets peeled and shredded.
Super peeled.
I think even if you're, let's say, starting at 40, yeah, you're probably not going to be very pliable as you were when you were just starting out, maybe in your 20s, but you can still make significant progress. I think if there's good structure and there's good nutritional habits, and yeah, why not? And I've seen guys improve in their 40s. I'm one of them. Brad's one of them.
Yeah.
Marshall Johnson's one of them. So there's, and I would say you might get a little bit more newbie gains than at 40. Still.
Yeah. I mean, it's more fun if you start like you in your 40s. You're hoping for like a 1% change year after year versus someone who might have started.
I say the maturity level in general might be better because you're older. It's kind of like when you have kids, someone who has a kid who's 20 versus someone who has a kid when they're 40. I mean, they see 20 years more of life.
Yeah.
So they might be it might be because of maturity level, they might progress pretty well too.
Yeah. I have a woman on my roster who's 50. And although she'd been, and you guys met her at that symposium, but although she'd been weight training for, like in a structured manner, like as far as progressive overload and the way that we train all that stuff, although she'd been active and been in the gym, she wasn't actually doing it in a structured way and calculating nutrition and all that. And she's hitting PRs left and right. And that's a woman in her 50s. And I could not be more freaking proud of her. And she's lifting more than I think I was at like 25 because I was just as new. I was in like my first 5-10 years too. Yeah. As far as competing wise, Brad, y'all are both able to do masters also.
I've done that before.
Have you?
Yeah, right when I turned in 2011 because I was 40 that year.
Yeah.
My brother and I, when we did the NPC San Francisco and the NPC Central Valley, we're doing masters and open.
Oh, okay, both. I was like, what?
And what was cool was the Central Valley was the first one we did was NPC. Mm-hmm. We went to go register. The ladies that were taking the registration, they didn't believe we were 40.
Hey.
I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Well, you've never done that though, Brad, right?
I've never competed. I mean, outside of powerlifting, of course, as a bodybuilder, I've never competed as a master. No. I thought about doing the WNBF. I don't know if they still do it now, but they used to have the Masters Cup, which was basically all Masters bodybuilders back in, I think, 2009 or 10, Jeff, correct?
I still believe they do that. I think I saw it on the schedule, actually. I don't remember which show, but I know there's at least one that's all Masters.
Yeah. Yeah,
which,
and I
to
mean,
me, it's like in a natural bodybuilding world, it's not just like it's not easy. You go to a Masters, you think, oh, okay, it's all old guys. They're not going to be all that good because they're old, but it's almost the opposite.
It's actually the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah, the opposite. In fact, that's exactly why I decided not to do it. Is because when I was looking at the lineup, and I saw Leroy Perry and I saw Rodney Hilaire, and I was like, God dang, that is a stacked lineup. That is a world
Those are,
championship lineup. I'm not
yeah.
doing that.
Does
But
it
yeah,
feel any different, like emotionally, to be like, I'm in the old dude category?
when I was doing the NPC Masters, because it was a local level, I felt like I was at an advantage
Okay.
because I think, I don't want to say every show, but just the ones that I've done and know of. Usually the Masters, like you get maybe one or two good guys, and the other guys are kind of like little softer or whatever. They're not dialed all the way in.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, oh, let's see what I can do in the Masters.
Yeah, that's a really good point though. Now that I don't know why, I guess because I've never like made that decision to or had the option to compete in masters. I never thought about it. But when you look at a open versus novice versus masters, the masters definitely generally has better physiques than the novice, even though it's like 20s and then 40s or whatever as far as the age groups. That's a really
I
good point.
think I think it just depends on who shows up, but yeah, often
In
it's like
general.
I think people shouldn't look at masters as like, oh, that's a step down because they're older. It's actually, if you think about it, it's like, okay, if you got like guys like me and Brad in there
Yeah.
that have been training for 20, 30 years, the muscle maturity's there.
Yeah.
Granted, if we get in shape and we bring the package, yeah, I mean, we might have a better advantage over someone who's 25 years old and only been training a couple of years if we happen to be in the same division.
Yeah, let's continue down that separation. Like, do you want to talk about the disadvantages first? Or let's go there so that we can end on the high note. Like, what do y'all
Sure.
think are some things that aren't as easy? No.
I'll let Brad go first this time.
Yeah, I think probably the hardest part is just the training of it, because when we're younger, we've got the go hard, go home attitude. And so you do want to push yourself, and you do want to, you're young, you just kind of go at it with reckless abandon. And so you want to keep that approach, and you want to keep that, beast mentality into your 40s and your 50s. And you really have to be a little bit more cerebral about it. You can't just go in there with reckless abandon and, just throw a bunch of weight on the bar and just send it up. You know what I mean? And that's kind of a hard thing. And it's not that hard for me, because I'm lucky enough that I've, Eric, with doing all my coaching and my programming, it's pretty darn smart. But I know I've got a few, 50-year-olds, on my roster that they struggle with that like weekly, like every week. They're checking in and they're saying, "Gosh, I'm training, but it just doesn't feel like it. It doesn't feel like it used to."
Like their
And sometimes that's
joints?
a hard thing to do. Yeah, their joints,
Okay.
they're a little bit more beat up. They don't recover quite as fast. They can't do set after set after set after exercise after exercise after exercise for hours. And when you're used to going to the gym with that, beast mentality, it's kind of hard to check your ego at the door and, chalk it up to age and say, I just can't do that anymore. That's a rough thing.
Do you really think it's age, or do you think it's mental, like, I kind of give up because I'm on the other side of it? It's a little harder, therefore I feel defeated.
I think if it was a mental thing, like they feel defeated, they would just give up. They wouldn't do it at all.
Okay.
I think that would be probably the mindset. Whereas, at least these couple folks that I've got on my roster, they're still trying. They're still hard at it. Granted, they can't do it like they used to, and they want to be able to do it like they used to, but they're still trying. And it's like, let's face it, that's why they've hired us. They've hired us so that we can find a way for them to train, and be able to do the things that they want to do in their body that they're in now, as opposed to the body that they were in 20 years ago.
Why do you think that's easier for you, Brad, than most?
You mean to pick up a type of programming for them?
No, like you said, you're fortunate enough that you still feel like you can go there.
Oh, yeah. That's a good point. And, really, to be honest with you, I think it's because I've never been stronger. I have never been stronger in my entire life than I am right now. And so, granted, maybe I don't go at it with reckless abandon like I used to, but there's a lot to be said when you can train with the heaviest loads that you've ever used in your entire life. And, I think that's a big motivating factor, for me. That kind of forces me to get in and do my thing when maybe I don't necessarily want to, you know. Whereas I think, you know, when you can't do that, it'd be like, oh, why train today? You know, when you don't really feel like it, it's like, I'm not going to be doing anything epic, you know. I'm going to go in the gym and I'm going to do my thing, and, you know, I'm going to pound out some reps here and some reps there with this weight here and this weight there. And it's kind of hard to, you know, to do that when you've had those years of, you know, just hard, you know, steadfast approach.
I like that opposes Jeff, because you're not lifting the most weights you've ever lifted right now, right, Jeff?
Not at the current moment.
Right.
Probably the strongest I've ever been, I was early 40s, a couple of years back.
Okay. Do you think that's a strength or a joint thing? Because I know right now, go ahead and tell everyone about all your stuff.
My stuff, yeah.
The body stuff.
Kind of like Brad was saying, that it's like when I'm in the gym, like I have my days where I can really get after it and grind and push some sets to failure, and I'm super poised and collected. But what I've noticed too is that now, because I'm such an experienced lifter, I could generate a lot of power. Like there's hardly any momentum. There's a lot of focus in just like that one lift. It's so centered that I could generate a lot of effort, and it doesn't seem like it. Like you look at my videos, you're like, it looks easy. But is a difference from when I was like maybe my first few years of lifting, where it's like, oh, I'm using a lot of momentum, I'm swinging, and a lot of that going on. So what I've noticed in myself is that whenever I do get after it, because I can still get after it, it's the next day when I get up and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm not like 25 years old anymore. You know, I definitely could feel it. I wake up tired, sluggish. My body's aching more and it takes longer to recover. So I think that's the difference for me anyways, the last probably, I would say 2 years now, where I'm noticing that I'm slowing down from a recovery standpoint, not from a performance standpoint. Like I can't hit one RMs like I used to, but I can still like crank out sets and reps that are pretty damn impressive.
Yeah.
But the recovery aspect, so right now I'm still trying to figure out what's the best amount of volume and my recovery abilities. And I actually had to step back. I stepped back the other day and I'm like, I had to look at my spreadsheets and everything I've done. I'm like, I'm doing too much.
Okay.
I'm trying to do too much, so I'm not recovering. So what I did was I toned things down. I just downsized my programming. No more than 3 exercises per workout, 3 sets per movement. And it doesn't seem like a lot, but again, I'm generating enough power in there to get good stimulus. But then I don't feel as beat up the next day, so I can keep going without racking up little aches and pains and injuries. So I'd rather do less work, but be able to do it over the long haul versus trying to cram in a lot of work at once and not recover from it, beat myself up.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you know, an old car. You know, you got 100,000 miles on your car. You can't drive it like it's brand new. You gotta baby it. So that's basically what I've been doing, like probably here recently.
Jeff in the cars. Always Jeff in the cars.
But yeah, like Brad said, I think for Brad, like when I used to watch him lift, like when I first met him, you know, like 2009ish. What did I call you, Brad? Naturally intense. That was like the nickname I gave him, but we had to change it. It was someone else's, so we had to take it out.
Okay.
But the dude got after it. I mean, he was just like, I mean, his veins popping out on his forehead, eyes were all bloodshot doing his deadlifts, but now I could see that he's a far more poised, superior lifter now. And I think the programming has a lot to do with the reason why he's performing so well now.
Yeah, and what's interesting too, Brad, is you being the strongest you've ever been, and you said like I'm lucky in that. I wonder how much of that is attributed to the fact that some time ago you switched to strength focused training for your powerlifting. So like, what's to say if Jeff completely took 4 or 5 years or whatever to work on those 3 lifts, just like you did, you know? So your older athletes that we were talking about earlier, are they powerlifters as well, or just strict physique athletes?
They're both, one's a competing physique athlete, and then the other one's kind of, he's kind of like, I don't know, I wouldn't call him off season, but he's just kind of the perpetual, you know, I'm gonna probably compete someday, and I've got photo shoots planned, and, you know, and things like that. Yeah, those are my 2 guys in my 50s, and the one guy that's in my 50s he's very blessed. He's he's one of those guys that's just he's perpetually shredded and he's still got a lot of muscle. But what was the question, Andrew?
Was that you? How you're saying this is the strongest ever been, but you've been almost exclusively training for strength because of powerlifting for like a few years now, right?
Yeah, and even way back when I was doing more bodybuilding, with the type of training that I was kind of born and bred on, the maximum overload principles, generally it was pretty low volume in comparison to a lot of bodybuilder-ish type of work, And so, yeah, you pretty much stopped at 6 or 7 repetitions, and as soon as you got that amount, you would go up in weight, and then you would try again, to get 6 and 7 repetitions. So, yeah, who's to say that all those years, doing like a total of, maybe 5 or 6 exercises, not more than 6 repetitions in 3 sets of each exercise, maybe that's one of the reasons why I am as healthy as I am and as strong as I am now, as opposed to, the guys that were doing 8 and 12 and 15 and 20 repetitions and in 8, 10, 12 exercises, every training session, maybe that's got a little bit to do with it.
Yeah, because I don't know about you, Brad, when I was younger, I wasn't thinking about, I need to preserve my joints for later when I'm in my 40s. That was just like,
fuck it.
Let's get after it here. I'm cranking this shit out because I want to get jacked. There was no like thought of longevity or anything like that.
Yeah,
so that's
hard.
now. Looking now, it's like in hindsight, I probably should have had a little bit more priority with that. But that's now. It's like now that I'm here, my mid 40s experience, all that's why I'm like trying to preach a little bit to the younger guys. Hey, it's not always about doing more and more and more volume, load the bar up. You have to be smart with the training. You got to periodize it. You got to throw the deloads in there, all that good stuff, and think about what you're going to be doing 10 years, 15 years, 20 years from now. Because again, if you're in the sport as a competitive natural bodybuilder, it's a long game. It's not a short game.
Yeah, and I think
not a sprint. So if you want to enjoy the sport for years to come, you have to think about it somewhat. You can't just say, I don't want to listen to the old guy because he's all banged up. There's a reason, you want to plan for that so you can keep doing what you love to do later on.
Yeah, and I can say, too, that you guys, and we'll talk about how banged up y'all are now, but in the grand scheme of things, if you took a sample, at least if I think of 30 dudes that I know in their 40s, y'all are doing pretty damn good. As far as, like, they all talk about the past like it's the golden age, and you guys are so good at being in your prime now, even though you're hurting, right?
Yeah, the Al Bundy, I scored 4 touchdowns back in high school story.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of people, again, I realize I'm in my early 30s, but even at my age, there's a lot of people I know that are like, the past was the best. And I don't think that you guys ever saw it that way. And I think that's something that's admirable and contributes to your abilities to, like, keep going, is that y'all aren't done,
No.
In your brains, you're not done. And I think that carries a lot of value for these young kids that might be hurrying because they know 35-year-olds at their gym that talk about how much they used to bench.
Yeah. I think because I got into natural bodybuilding in the late 90s because that's when it was like really around me.
Yeah.
So, the guys, like, the guest poser was like Dave Gooden, and he was at the time like in his early 40s, mid 40s, somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. World champion, 40s. So it's like I saw that, and a lot of the guys, again, were older.
Yeah.
So I remember a guy, I think his name was Carmi Smith. I don't know if you heard of him, Brad. But he was like the WNBF champion. I think he was like 51 or 52 or something like that. So I would see these guys and like, oh, okay, they're all older. There must be a reason. So it's a long game.
Yeah.
So I never really got discouraged too much, like, I got to get jacked by tomorrow. I wanted to, but I also knew in the back of my mind it's going to take time.
That's interesting, and that's another side effect that we hadn't brought up in those other conversations about, like, the more subjective divisions, the divisions where you can kind of peak after like 3 years of training, or not peak, but get to the top levels so early. is that now you have like all these 21-year-old IFBB pros and IFPA pros in like bikini and physique and all that stuff, when you guys didn't have you just had like the guys that had the size and the leanness of the 30-40-year-olds to look up to.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, there was no men's physique, there was no bikini.
Yeah.
You guys had the wrong people on the other show. You should have me on there because I'm older than all you guys. I'm like listening to the podcast.
Hey, you were busy.
No, that's not how it was back then. But anyways, yeah.
I know there
like
back then is
first
still
shows. There was bodybuilding, and within bodybuilders, masters, junior or teen, novice, open.
all bodybuilding.
On the female side, it was female bodybuilding, masters, novice, open.
Oh.
There was no figure. There was no bikini. None of that. It was just bodybuilding.
Yeah. See, when Eric and Bert talk about back then, that's still before my back then. So I'm like, oh yeah, totally. Whatever you guys say.
But anyways,
Because I'm like the child.
the 40-year-old bodybuilding. So.
Well, it's important though. It's important because the younger people listening to this, like you said, you're like the people I looked up to, the best in the sport, were 20 years older than you. And now, if I'm a 25-year-old looking at the best in the sport of, and not even the sport, but like if I go to a physique athlete competition, I'm a 25-year-old. Half of them are younger than me. Half of them are older than me. So I could see how it feels like more of an urgency now, I guess.
Yeah.
And
to some people, in perspective.
Yeah.
Okay.
Depending on the class that you're looking at. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're still seeing it all. Go ahead, Brad.
Well, I was just going to say back, in the day that I started and, Jeff had already had about 10 years in, I don't know about you, Jeff, but I remember seemed like it was a lot of the guys that won the pro cards and won their overalls. They were older. They were in their late 30s, early to mid 40s, It seemed like those were always the guys that ended up winning.
I wonder if that.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I think it varies, but I think I would say if I had to estimate, I would say generally a little older than younger because of that muscle maturity and more time in the gym, more experience.
Yeah.
Whereas like I've competed in the MPC and the non-tested route, it wasn't that way.
Yeah.
It's different.
We keep lightly mentioning it, but I want y'all to talk about currently what hurts on you right now. And how bad is it compared to, say, 5 years ago, 10 years ago? You can go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, it hurts. Nope. Let's see. So
I was
dealing with the left hip, right piriformis, right sciatica because of the piriformis, left lower back strain, right lower back strain. Let's see what else. Right shoulder aches from time to time. I'm trying to think. Oh, left arm tendonitis, left elbow tendonitis.
In the last year, all that.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. The left elbow tendonitis, the pain level is probably like a 2 now, where it used to be like 9 and 10. So that's a lot better. The left hip, same thing. It's barely noticeable now. The lower back strains are healed. Now it's just mainly the piriformis and the sciatica that I'm trying to get all the way healed back. I think what's really key is that I started stretching a lot more for that. Alberto hooked me up with some good information for the piriformis, so that helped out a lot. Been a little more religious with that. A lot of my issues, I think, is just this chair. Sitting in this chair, working a desk job. Yeah. So I'm like super, super tight, and I've been guilty of not staying mobile. So that's something I've been trying to make more of an effort on a daily basis to stretch and to get out of this chair and actually stand at my desk a lot. So I think a lot of it's not attributed to age per se, but just
lifestyle,
just being immobile. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the body's meant to move. It's not meant to sit for hours on end. So I think it's a combination of age, the recovery factor, but also just the lifestyle.
Okay. And you, Brad? What's going on with you right now?
Well, I'm pretty lucky. The big thing I got is this thing in my lat right here that's been bothering me what feels like forever now. It's probably been the better part of about a year. But I'm lucky in that really the only thing I can't do is deadlift. It's the only exercise where I feel whatever that is right there. I don't know if it's a lat or if it's an intercostal or whatever. It's getting annoying. It's been there for a long time, but that's my big one that I've been really, really fighting. And then outside of that, because I do have such a crooked back, I have little bouts of tightness in the piriformis and in the hips. And, usually if I stay on top of my I don't know what you want to call it, but I don't usually do my mobility work when I'm training. I usually do a lot of movement prep and I'll do a lot of warm up, but a lot of my mobility is here at home when I'm watching TV or helping the kid or something like that. I'll do a lot of my stretching and a lot of my mobility work, outside of the gym. And I think that's what's one of the things that's really kind of helped keep all those things at bay, and when they do pop up, it's there for a couple weeks and then it kind of goes away. And then, like Jeff, I recognized a few years ago that I couldn't sit over there where I used to sit. And so I've moved over here to where I have been now for like the last probably 2.5, 3 years. I stand, probably 6 of my 8 hours of the day. And, I have a chair that I'll sit here for a couple hours, but otherwise I stand because it seems like my hips, my spine, it all just stays healthier if I stand up here. But yeah, outside of that, things that have come and then gone, I think from the low bar position, I'll sometimes get a little pain here in my arm. Mm-hmm. That was present, like the end of last year, and we kind of changed the programming a little bit. It's gone away. Gosh, what else? My elbows right now are sore, but not because of training, because of all the freaking snow shoveling that I've been doing. That's been tearing up my elbows. But yeah, I want to say that's pretty much it. Just outside of the little things that kind of pop up and then go away, and then pop up and then go away.
Are there any other physical, I know we'll talk about, I guess, like what we kind of did, like mindset shifts or whatever, but any other physical things that you guys have noticed that have really helped your longevity besides adopting a mobility practice and standing more at your desk?
I think working around the aches and pains is pretty important and pivotal. So like for the left arm tendonitis, I was doing blood flow restriction for triceps and biceps. So I was able to use, minimal loads, so it's less impact on that elbow. Uh-huh. And I was paying a close attention to the things I was doing outside the gym as well, like not using that arm as much. Uh-huh. And over time, it eventually started to heal up and get better. But prior to that, prior to using BFR, I was trying to, maybe when I was doing curls, I'd keep an open hand, just have the handle in my palm, but keep an open hand so I didn't grip. That worked, but I was still using heavy loads, so still getting some pain. So doing small things like that to try to work around those things, to keep, obviously you want to try and keep progressing, you want to keep training. For the right shoulder, I went away from barbell pressing, overhead barbell pressing, because that was restricted. Just in one spot with a barbell, whereas now I do dumbbells, one arm at a time. I could put that dumbbell in a more comfortable position where there's less pain. So that's the main reason why I stick to dumbbells. I know that's a question I get all the time. Why do you just do that one, single arm overhead press? Because that's the main reason why. It just puts me in a better position. I was using the Smith's machine for squatting here recently.
Yeah. I
was turning it more into a hack squat by putting my feet out in front of me, because I wouldn't have to hip hinge as much. Because with a free weight squat, there's your
have to open up.
Yeah. So the piriformis was being intact. So I was like, okay, let me do a Smith machine, put my feet close together, put them out front, so I could at least work my quads. So doing things like that to keep my training going, even though to allow for some recovery and healing time.
So in essence, listening to your body and not being a jackass about it.
Not being a jackass and trying to do the same movements that basically hurt it in the first place. So finding alternative movements, using those, being smart with them though, not going crazy. And then once I start recovering better, then usually I'll try to implement the former exercises back in, but slowly. It would be like, okay, let me do one set of squats with 135. Do that. Okay, that's good. Now let me go back to the Smith for the last 2 or 3 sets. to get my real work in. Then the next week or the next session, okay, now let's do two sets, and just slowly taper it in, and then taper the other ones out. If that makes sense.
Yeah, so like a small transition. Like
Exactly.
there's just a lot of ways to be a jackass about injuries and pains like that. And you mentioned a lot of them. Like 1, ignoring them would be a disaster, right? 2, working around them. And 3, which I think a lot of people do forget, is the slow introduction back. Instead, it feels better. Okay, let's go.
Yeah.
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 Okay. What other disadvantages do you feel like are going on now that in the last like 5 years? Have y'all had any major plateaus at any point in your life, like as a lifter?
Like progress stalls just because it's stalled.
Or
I think the only thing that's stalled me is like just the aches and pains.
okay.
Because I was flying like when I was 42. I mean, that's when I was hitting like 500-pound deadlift, the big squats, the big overhead pressing.
Yeah.
I was flying. It was just okay. All of a sudden, these little injuries, and then the calf tear.
Yeah.
That put a halt to my progress anyway.
But it was never.
So now,
would you say like age related? Yet.
No.
Okay.
It was more like injury related than life related, like having a kid. No.
That's right. You took like a year off.
So, or 4 months off. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just
From
making
training,
shit up. Like you took 5 years away for one child. Brad, have you ever had any major setbacks that you can think of? Like 6 months or longer because of anything?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've had setbacks, but I think I've had like stall outs.
Okay.
And it was probably just more so due to life, than anything. Other priorities, kind of taking precedence over training. Like Jeff, when he had Ethan, that was a priority. That came before, training did. And I would say probably, I don't know, maybe mid 2010, something like that. Xander was starting to play football and I was coaching the team, and that kind of took a little bit of precedence. And so I was only training like twice a week, and usually only kind of doing the bare minimum, of what I could do, just hurry up, get in, and then get out,
Yeah.
I think probably my physique it's probably gotten about as good as it's going to get. I think most of the development physique-wise that I've gotten over the last few years has all been lats, which is a good thing because obviously that's where I need to have, the most improvement. But yeah, it's kind of like when you're talking about, progress and possible stall outs, it's kind of like, well, we've got kind of 2 different avenues. We've got kind of the physique, is it progressing? Is it, had stall outs? And then we've got strength, of course, as well. Is it progressing or has it stalled out?
Yeah.
And I think, my physique has probably stalled out, probably more so in comparison to Jeff. Jeff's physique seems like it's really starting to take off. Whereas mine, I think it's just because I have been focused more on strength and less on bodybuilding type stuff. I've had areas that I feel like, physique-wise have stalled out, but at least the overall goal that we set out, back in 2011 and 2012 was to get Brad's lats to show up more and more and get the back wider and get more depth in there. I feel like that is still happening, and awesome. I think that I can pick up those physique areas that I need to pick up, when I need to, when the chips are down. So yeah, I think that's, it's just life. I think life kind of sometimes gets in the way and causes our stall outs, more than anything. Because even like Jeff said, sure, he can't hit the 500-pound deadlift and the 225-pound overhead press, but he's still able to, massage things such that the least amount of volume is dropped. You're one of the questions you asked, one of the things, what have we done, to be a jackass, way back when. One of the things, I refused to drop weight. I mean, I refused to drop weight. It was like, I don't care if I am getting, two doubles with the most amount of momentum I could possibly get in, I would not drop weight,
That's being a jackass.
Now knowing, yeah, and knowing what we know now, you want to take a hit to volume, just do that kind of approach. Just be so stubborn that you'll do two doubles with a ridiculous amount of weight as opposed to dropping the weight and doing 3 sets of 8 or 3 sets of 10, So with Jeff, I think that his approach is helped his physique still progress, even though maybe he's not doing the things that he's, done in the past. Andrew, I don't know about you, but I mean, some of the stuff that I see of Jeff here recently, if I didn't know Jeff, I'd say that dude's on drugs. And I think it's a testimony to how smart that he's being in the gym right now.
Yeah, and I think that's always like that hard dance of in and out of season. Like something that I admire that Jeff does, and that actually Brandon does way better than I do, is keep, like we always say, keep the goal, but like, I want to build my physique. Brandon has no intention of powerlifting. Jeff has no intentions of powerlifting. And it's so much easier, or not easier, you guys actually do it, whether it's easy or not, can detach from the weights lifted a little more. And I think it's hard because a lot of the people that we work with get so, because the relationship with food gets jacked up as a competitive bodybuilder, and then you're like, focus on the strength, focus on performance, focus on performance, focus on numbers. But that it turns out to be like this new fun thing, and they have to exist like that because off season is so much longer than in season, and then they get so attached to those numbers that it's hard to pull back from them. And Jeff, you do a good job pulling back from them without it ever affecting like your seemingly to affect your like motivations and your drive and your sense of self. It used to.
When I was younger, because I wanted that 300-pound bench press, and I wanted the big. I didn't really care about deadlifts and squats back then. It was all over body, but yeah, I wanted that big bench press. So I was always chasing, 1 rep maxes on bench. But then over time, I became really, like we've talked about in the past, I'm so competitive about winning bodybuilding shows that I knew in my mind that, a 300-pound bench press, that doesn't do nothing for me on stage. So I'm like, okay, I got to plus, and I was more into like, Mike Mincer HIIT training, so it's just taking everything to failure and going hardcore. So that got my juices flowing more than like hitting like a 1 rep max. It was like taking a set to absolute failure and killing yourself and beyond.
Yeah, which neither are really that intelligent usually.
No, it wasn't. So obviously I made more progress, post 3DMJ than I did prior to 3DMJ. But that's what fueled me more so. And then now, I mean, my mentality with trying to hit 1 rep max is like, again, it's like, what's a 300-pound bench press going to do for me on stage? It's let's say I work like, okay, I'm going to work towards that 300-pound bench press. That's what's going to drive the physique. So whether I actually attempt the 1 rep max or not, it doesn't change my physique.
Yeah. See, I'm not very good at that. I get better at it.
People need that. Oh yeah, some people need that that max attempt. They need that to fuel their training, which is fine if you're intelligent about it. You can use it to fuel your training. But for me personally, I don't care anymore. It's like I don't have an identity tied to 300 or 350 or 400 like these numbers.
Yeah. What's helped? Go ahead.
I'll say I tend to look at, okay, what am I moving the last month in comparison to the month before? What am I seated, like my seated rows, like I was so fixated on improving my back this off season, like improving it. Mm-hmm. I was doing seated rows with, like, my only stack only goes up to 200, but I added a weight on there, like manually.
Yeah.
Got it up to 215. I did like 3 sets of 8. That was like a PR. I'm like, okay, I hit that, but I know I can't probably do 215 every single workout, but I'm handling in between 190 to 210 regularly versus maybe the 6 months prior, it was like 180, 190.
Yeah.
So just think of all that volume that's been racked up over that 6 months.
Yeah. And that was something that that what Brad said that was like the real game changer for me like 3 or 4 years ago, which I'm still not great at it. I really emotionally like my lifts. I do. But it's the, like we always say, we have to educate our athletes. Like I say it way quicker to say it to my athletes than I am to myself, but it's the whole like volume switch. Like, but if you drop 10 pounds, could you do an extra set? Times 10 reps. And there you go. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it's always, a tool in the toolbox, right? If you know how to calculate volume, which we all do, it's pretty basic. But if you actually look at that and always refer to it, it helps me get through the days that aren't so amazing.
Like sometimes failure too, like the last set, you're like, oh, you're ready to struggle. You think I could get one more, and you're probably going to struggle really bad. And then my thought is like, do I really need to get after it here? If I want a little bit more, I'll just let me stop that rep and do another set.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you get 5 reps in the next set, then you did that much more volume. Yeah. It's
potentially less risk for injury too, because you're not struggling and straining on that last one. You're a little more rested after a minute or two. So I don't know. It's like like you said, it's perfect. Like tools. There's a lot of tools in the toolbox that are at our disposal.
And look at the recovery that happens afterward too. You know, like Berto's famous quote, you know, 1 rep is not going to make you, but 1 rep can break you. That one really hard rep to failure it may not injure you, but that could, you know, put you in just enough central nervous system fatigue and just enough fatigue that your next session, you're not going to be able to perform quite as good as you might have been able to if you had dropped the weight down a little bit. Yeah. And then got 5 more repetitions in that were less precarious. You know, that's kind of something that I'm always thinking about. You know, it's like, is what I'm doing right now going to take away from the performance of next week's training or during the taper or during the peak? You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm very mindful of that. And thank goodness Eric has been put a little bug in my ear for that.
Well, I want to go ahead, Jeff.
I don't want to sound like that. We're not saying don't get after it, because there's sometimes you have to get after. Like every once in a while, I'll go to failure if I want to try to hit a rep target or something, but not doing it consistently. So like Brad said, you're just racking up a lot of fatigue. You're at more risk for injuries. I have even called out a couple of my athletes, you know, because I say, hey, let me see your form videos. Let me see what your curls look like. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, dude, that's not a 9. That's not an 8.5 RP. That's like 6. You need to get after it more.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's like, you do need to work hard and get after it. You know, you can't just waffle it and expect to have a good physique.
Word. I want to talk about the good things. You said waffle it. Okay. I do want to talk about, you opened with it, Jeff, but I want to go into it and to others as to all the things that you feel like are advantages to being this mature of an athlete. Obviously, there's the muscle maturity and the fact that you just typically look different, but are there things that make this whole bodybuilding thing easier now that you're in your 40s?
Yeah, because I've had not just physically, I got all this muscle, but mentally, like I'm a far superior bodybuilder now than I was in my 20s. Far superior. Like knowing how and when to push myself, like we just were talking about. Mm-hmm. Even though I am banged up, I mean, we all get banged up, but I'm much better at I'm more self-aware because of all the experience I've had.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge advantage. And even because I have 30 shows under my belt, like my posing, I don't practice my pose anymore.
It's
not
there.
To toot my own horn, but it's just there. I mean, when you do it for 30 shows, 13 seasons, ton of practice, it's ingrained. So even my exercise form, usually I could do any exercise. You tell me to do an exercise that's new, I'll probably have the form down pretty fast. It's just because you're just experienced.
Yeah.
It's all huge advantages.
Brad?
Yeah, and if I could tack on to what Jeff said, I know when I was a younger bodybuilder, I mean, shoot, sometimes I didn't even look at what was happening next week, much less what was happening next month or the month after that,
Really focused on right now.
Exactly, and I don't know about you guys, but I see that a lot with younger athletes. They're like, blocks of training, what am I going to do, 8-10 weeks from now? That's a new mindset. I've never thought about that before. That's kind of like the younger athletes. I can relate. I was there. I'm thinking about this session here, maybe at the most this session what I'm going to do next week. And one of the biggest advantages that I've learned of training into my 40s is just enjoying my training more and thinking more about what's going to happen in March and what's going to happen in April. Because when I was younger, I had this, I don't know why, but I had this dream of being a professional athlete. I didn't know what it was going to be. You know, I didn't know, at the time, I loved football. But I just loved the mindset of your job being tuned towards, you know, a bigger cause, you know, an event on a day. And I think that was what kind of drew me to auto racing as well. And now look what I'm doing. You know, I really enjoy, I mean, yes, there's bad days and there's good days. There's days where I want to get after it. And there's days where I'm dragging myself around before I go hit the gym. But nonetheless, I genuinely enjoy my training. I genuinely enjoy the grind. I enjoy, here a couple of weeks ago, I had a really rough day. I mean, I had to like say a Hail Mary before every single freaking set, you know. But that's so gratifying. And it's a dream come true. You know, that kid in me that wanted to be the Rocky, you know, and be the Tony Dorsett and be the guys that were training hard for, you know, an event. I mean, let's face it, that was one of the most epic parts of Rocky was those montages of him training and doing all that stuff that, you know, people thought was impossible. I'm living that life, you know. I think that's something that you don't realize till you've done a few years of it and you're in your 30s and your 40s and you look past the one session today.
That's kind of the maturity level. That's like a maturity process. I think I learned to appreciate my training more so now. That's why it's like if I have an awesome, like Brad said, if I have a great workout, it's like, hell yeah, that was awesome. But if I have a terrible one, I'm like, big deal. I still moved weight. It's better than not moving anything at all. And so to me, it's like that's still, it's productive. And I think when I was younger, if I had a bad workout, missed a 1 rep max, oh God, the world's ending. You know, it's a terrible workout. You beat yourself up. You feel guilty about it. You want to try to maybe do extra sets or whatever to make up for the shitty work. And you're just like, no, just take what your body's going to give you on that day, chalk it up as a few pennies towards your muscle count and move on. So that's why, I've learned to love the process more than I've learned to love the progress. I couldn't have said that 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
Yeah. And do you think, too,
There's no such thing as a bad day in the gym.
What's that?
There's just no such thing as a bad day in the gym, in my opinion.
Not for me either, unless I tear my calf. That's a bad day.
Unless I can't walk.
That definitely could be an exception.
That's a bad day, yeah. That I'll say, that's not very enjoyable.
But I think one of the other things that you'll have to your advantage, and I realize not everybody does, but I think we collectively as a team, and I know a lot of other people in our lives we kind of set ourselves up to be able to continue to do this. Whereas I feel like in your 20s, like you're squeezing in workouts between class and school and work and da-da-da, and some people kids and spouses and da-da-da. Yeah. For me, it's obviously way easier to train now than it was like when I was in grad school. Like our lives, like you said, Jeff, on one hand, you're like, shit, I just sit here all day, but you get to sit there all day. Whereas some people, like all your mechanical energy does kind of get saved for the gym.
Yeah, because I was actually now, I would say, because I used to work in the auto plant, it was actually harder on me physically to train than I would say now, with the exception of I just can't recover as well now because of my age. But back then, working, 3 hours of commuting, and then working for 8 to 9, sometimes, 8 to 9 hours a day, and then another long drive home, it's like, okay, now I got to train. And then when I was prepping, it was like I was doing cardio on top of all that. And getting like 5 hours sleep. So physically, I look back on it and go, oh, wow. And I used to complain. I used to think I was lazy sometimes. Like, no, I was not lazy. But that's how much of a desire and passion I had to progress.
Yeah.
I felt like I was lazy. And looking back, and I'm like, no, you weren't lazy. You were just tired.
You're just overrun as fuck. Yeah. What about you, Brad, too? Do you feel like, because I have a couple of students on my roster, I'm like, I don't know how the fuck you're doing all this. Like, I have no idea, because I look at my life compared to theirs, and it's like, yeah, the injuries might still be there. And like, you would think that young people would be able to throw in all this extra volume, and some of them can, but with the lifestyles that some of them live, it's like, Jesus.
Yeah,
Like,
that's it.
Yeah. That's kind of one of our challenges as a coach, you know, is how do we get a good training plan, a good structured training plan for those folks when they are trying to cram them in between classes, or they got to get up early, you know, at 4 a.m, hit the gym at 4:30, and then go to their first class at, you know, 6 or 7 or whatever, you know. But you know, it was like we were saying, you know, it's better to get some volume in than to have the perfect setup with all the volume, you know.
yeah.
There's always ways that you can work around it. You know, shoot, we can plan blocks of training to where during the semester, maybe that'll be our little bit more of an intensity phase where volume might be a little bit lower and we're using some heavier loads, you know, and then during the summer, okay, now let's hit some volume phases or where we can do more reps and we can do longer training sessions and things like that, you know. There's a way around it, you know, and I think the biggest thing that people get trapped in is that if I can't do the perfect setup, I better not do it at all, you know. Or like you said,
they force
Andy,
it.
it's like they force it. They think to themselves, I've got to do this
And then
this
they run
way,
themselves into the ground.
or they sacrifice family and personal life and sometimes grades, you know. Yeah, there's ways that you can manage that so that you can have a little bit of your cake and eat it too, you know. But yeah, that's I think that's kind of one of the fun things as coaches is trying to finagle that.
Yeah. The first question I ask is, what's your life schedule like?
Yeah.
You know, and once you figure that out, then you know kind of more along the lines of what you can throw at them. I had one guy that basically he runs a business. He's starting another one, so that's 2. Super busy dude. So I'm like, okay, there's no way. And he told me I only have like 30 minutes to train. Okay, so
you're warmed up.
Well, yeah, 3 exercises each workout had 3 exercises, 3 sets, like very minimal, but progression scheme in place. You can still progress with that.
Yeah. And the people,
there's no reason why you can't make progress with that setup if
Yeah.
you're doing it consistently. It may not, maybe say in theory, maybe it's not as optimal something with more volume, but it's sure as hell not doing anything at all. You're going to still keep making progress over time. And like Brad was saying, if I try to say, okay, I want you to run this program with all this volume, he's either not going to do it or he's going to try to do it, and he's going to be so wigged out and stressed out trying to force it. Stress levels get amplified. He's at more at risk for injury.
Yeah.
He's probably not going to perform all that well, and he's not going to recover all that well. So therefore, the 3 exercise, in theory, probably deliver better results and more
way
progress.
better results. Yeah.
So it's not always about more is better. It's better is better.
Better is better.
Ooh, that's a good Instagram quote card right there, Jeff.
Word.
They always make fun of me. And do you feel like, and this is so general, and I know, but if we're looking at, because the only way I can like compare it is like a 20-year-old versus a 40-year-old, do you feel like with all the people on your roster that not just a maturity level is there, but the, in a weird way, do you feel like the people that are in their 40s that actually have less time are more patient? Or,
I think it's an individual thing.
is it still, there's not like a trend that y'all have noticed?
Because I have some I have some younger athletes on my roster now. They're getting after it. They're mature, getting after it, working hard, getting in shape. They have college, school, work, whatever, and they're getting after it and getting it done because they have a good head on their shoulders. Then you have older ones too that are the same way. I think it just depends.
Yeah, it's individual because I know my 50-year-old, I have to have a little pep talk with him every week, you know. Like I'm not doing what I was talking about before. I'm not doing what I used to do, you know, and I'm not getting after it like I used to, and progress is not as happening as fast as I want it to. We got to have that little talk, you know. It's still happening, you know. It's still happening, and like Jeff said, what we're doing now is probably a whole lot more effective than if you were trying to do what you were before. You getting hurt, having to stop, being stressed out, your training's not as effective, So yeah, it's an individual thing. I think sometimes experience and wanting to live the glory days is almost as bad as the impatient person.
Okay. Yeah, I hear you. Do you guys feel like you've redefined Jeff, do you feel like you've redefined your definition of a good workout or of a good year or of a good whatever? Or do you feel like you just kind of embraced what comes? I don't know if that was even an either or.
I think my perspective on the sport in general is a lot different than it once was. The competitiveness is different. Not so much like I'm still competitive. It's just the way I look at it. It's different. It's in my opinion healthier for me, anyways. The way I train, it's just the mindset's a lot more mature and a lot more healthy versus the way it was back when I was younger. Like I always tell myself, I might have said this out loud, I don't know. I wish I can take my mindset now and go back when I started.
Yeah.
Because I'd be probably a lot better than I am now.
I don't know.
I can't say for sure, but
Yeah.
I would say, I in theory anyways, that with this experience level, this mindset, and you take it into that, like right when I was 14 when I first started.
Oh, well, yeah.
It started out that way. Yeah, I mean, who knows where I'd be.
Okay. Brad, what do you...
I'd be like in SEMA. I'd be like 6'5", 300 pounds.
I would be 4 inches taller.
You would not be 6'5".
He's not 6'5", but yeah, I exaggerated that a little. But
is he? How tall is he? He's tall as fuck. Sorry, I need to stop cussing. He is really tall.
He's not on the verge of being elite.
Yeah, and he's
very young.
Early 20s, yeah.
20s.
Early 20s.
So
he's got a great head on his shoulders.
An outlier, but yeah, he's got a great head on his shoulders. He's
good
been
work ethic.
Coached, and he's a good dude, good work ethic, well structured, intelligent, mature for his age.
Yeah.
So he's got it going on. So he's in my opinion light years ahead of the game.
Yeah, I agree. Brad, what do you think makes it so much more enjoyable now? Because different goals, because your perspective has changed, or because you're easier on yourself? What do you think's helping you?
Yeah,
okay.
All of that. Yeah, because I kind of alluded on what, I'm kind of living the dream right now. I'm living that athlete's life that I wanted to live when I was in high school, and in college. And then, I think probably just taking pressure off of ourselves. It's like I told you guys, if I couldn't go heavy, I wasn't going to do it. If I didn't have the perfect setup, it was like, I better just stay home. It's not going to be worth doing it,
Dang.
And that was a lot of years with that.
That's like, throwing a
Andrea,
fit.
She's spinning right now because that driver is insane.
Yeah. It's hard. Sorry, because my coaches would have kicked my ass when I was 7 years old. Oh man, I guess I had it lucky in that regard. Right? I was coached very early.
You know what helped me though is going through my last prep when I had probably missed more sessions than any other prep, but yet still was at my best. So it not to say that you can get away with not working hard or not working, but I just realized that, okay, I don't have to be so anal and perfect. I could still, as long as there's time, I allow myself the time to do the job, you can get it done.
Yeah.
So that was huge for me to realize, like, okay, don't put so much pressure on myself and don't put so much time to put a strict timeline on things. Because it just, for me personally, it puts me in a better working environment.
Yeah.
The least stressful environment.
Word.
And that was probably had a lot to do with it, don't you think, Jeff? Is that you just allowed yourself more time and you just lived the lifestyle.
Yeah.
You probably got the same amount of volume. It was just stretched out over the course of 40, 50 weeks as opposed to cramming it all into 18 and then not doing anything for the rest of the year.
Stretching the timeline out. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's living, not saying, oh yeah, I'm prepping. as hardcore prepping.
Exactly.
It's like, okay, this is a lifestyle. Let me turn this into a lifestyle, and let me figure out how to manage this with, family and work and all that. And so I think this prep, I'm so far even more relaxed than I was.
I don't know if I'll ever get there. I don't know if I operate well there. That's all.
Not yet.
I don't know if I ever would though. I don't know. You're right, never. But I like the hell yeah, it's prep time. I still like it.
What's cool is because you're in your early 30s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. In 2002, I was 31 when I had that anal prep.
Oh, the anal prep.
I had to be perfect. I was 31. So a lot can happen from one time you're 31 to 45.
Yeah, I mean, my 2011 versus my 2013 was night and day. And I was still like what most people would call crazy, but compared to my 2011, I was like, I'm living the life with my Walden Farms in my purse. I was like,
I don't know if you do this, Brad, because you're older like me. Do you reflect a lot, self-reflect?
I do. I know I'm not that.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
I find myself reflecting a lot.
On the old times or yesterday?
Yeah.
Or both?
All of it.
Yeah, just
and
looking.
I'll think back, I remember that time I was, wow, yeah, that was pretty bad.
Yeah.
So try to okay, I need to work on that more so and learn from it and work on it.
Yeah.
But just now, like you just said, I was thinking back to 2002, 2003, 2004, when I was about Andrea's age. I had to be perfect. I had to be anal, and then I just think about when I won my pro card, just, 5, 6 years later, I had a better product and it wasn't nearly as anal, So
is there another word we could use? Jeff's like my anal prep.
Well, yeah, there we go. OCD, yeah. So yeah, you can't see yourself, being there, Andrea, but give it about 8 years.
Yeah, but do you guys enjoy those kind of preps? Did you enjoy it? Do you enjoy my life's intense right now? Like all that.
I kind of think, I kind of look back at myself and I'm almost ashamed of myself in a way.
Really?
And
this is good.
Yeah,
okay.
Because I kind of, I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain, but I had this elitist attitude.
Okay.
Of, I'm prepping, you're not, you're inferior to me, I have a higher discipline standard than you,
That's not where I was going.
No,
but...
I mean, maybe I enjoyed it at the time, but I look back and I'm kind of ashamed of myself in a way. And, I just think back to my most recent prep in 2012 or 2013, whenever that was that Berto and I did the WNBF show that Bob and Tina put on. Was it 14? Mm-hmm. That was a much more enjoyable prep. Much more enjoyable. I was much more humble. I look at that prep and I'm like, that was a prep to be, pretty darn proud of. I went to Florida with my family and I still, made progress with my physique and I was just a better person, all in all. And at the time I don't know, I think the pressure that I put on myself made it less enjoyable of I have to stay on top of this and this has to be perfect and the switch is turned on and it stays on, until after the show is done.
But I think it's important to distinguish the difference though between being very OCD and anal and being an elitist jerk. That's not, you know what I mean?
Right. That's different.
They're very different. When I'm I really like the intensity, and you're I was an asshole. I'm that's not what I was saying. I think,
true.
But I do think that I search for that. Go ahead.
I could see you being more like that, being less of a jerk. You would definitely be the antithesis of Brad.
We'll ask Brandon about that next time. But I think though that it does. I operate under stress most of the time. I create that on my own in or out of prep, which you guys know. So maybe that's why I enjoy that and why I'll find lower stress more enjoyable. But I definitely think that I could be less stressed in it. If 2011 was you were crazy 10 out of 10, I'd say 2013 I was a 7 or 8, and maybe my settling is a 5 or 6 rather than a 3 or 4 or something,
Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about the perspectives that I have.
Yeah.
Back then, because I wasn't pro yet.
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted that pro status, so that drove the fuel, like that motivation, that determination, and that kind of drove that stress level a little bit.
Yeah.
Once I got the pro status and then started competing as a pro, like the first year as a pro, it's like, yeah, you want to still do good and do well, get in shape, but it was also less pressure for me because it was like, oh, I'm going against a bunch of pros, so just standing there is going to be an honor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like I wasn't worried about winning a show or trying to place high. I wanted to, don't get me wrong, but it was like less pressure because the expectations weren't as high.
Well, and
then so this year I'm kind of feeling that pressure again, like I used to a little bit, because in 2014 I won the Pro International. So it's like I'm almost putting these expectations on myself. Like I need to do just as good as that or better. And I've even been thinking about this last couple of weeks. I'm like, I need to really like relax about that, because it's just creating unwanted stress that I really don't need and does nothing for me, but just get me all amplified. So I think like earlier, like back in the day, it was like I was really just gunning for something that was, I felt like I had high expectations. I could attain that. So now it's like, okay, where do I go here? A world championship? I mean, to put that much pressure on yourself, I don't want to do that again.
Okay.
Plus, you're in a field that's only getting more competitive.
Exactly.
There's more Jeff Alberts out there.
There's a handful of dudes that could mop me up. So
yeah,
it's like, why am I going to put that extra pressure on me to try to beat what I did in 2014? Just get in the best shape I can and let the chips fall where they may and have fun.
I love that.
Do the old guy thing. Do the old guy thing.
It's not the old guy thing. You're only old. I don't think y'all are old. It's just so hard for me to do this because I don't think y'all are old in my brain.
No, I'm not old.
I know.
Mature.
Mature. Yeah. To close, would it be cool if you guys could give maybe your best piece of advice for a 20-ish year, or some advice for like a young guy who is worried about their longevity, right? Or who should be considering it maybe. And then advice for someone who's about y'all's age but maybe just now starting to compete or not sure how much longer they can go. Who wants to go first? I'm just going to skip. Okay.
So the young guy, embrace that there's a long road ahead.
Yeah.
Enjoy what you're doing. Don't put too much pressure on yourself where you're not enjoying the process, because before you know it, you're going to get my age and you're like, oh shit, 20 years just went by and I didn't even have fun. I was so stressed out.
Yeah.
So enjoy the process. As long as you're putting the work in, if you're consistent, you're going to get to where you want to go. And that's the thing. It's like I haven't done nothing magical or special in the weight room. Like it's just I just been putting the work in. And it wasn't until I hit my early 40s where I'm like, oh shit, I think I'm here. I think I'm actually okay. I got this physique. I can actually compete on a pro stage. It might come sooner for other people, but it's consistency. So just have fun. What was the question for the older guys?
Let me ask Brad about his young people advice, and I'll come back to old people. Young and old.
I think just like Jeff said, just know that, enjoy the life. Just get in touch with why you started doing this. It's not all about the muscles, and it's not all about, the chicks and looking good on the beach and, getting up on the stage in the Speedo, I mean, let's face it. I mean, gosh, here I go. I might sound elitist, but there's a reason why we like doing this. We like doing this because we like the lifestyle of living an athlete, living the life of an athlete and moving towards something and making progress, and just enjoy living the life. Enjoy living that life that might be just a glimpse of what we see all those famous, MMA athletes and football players and basketball players. We can live a glimpse of that life every single day. Every single time that we're in the gym, we get to live a little glimpse of that life, and enjoy it because this is the time when you're really going to have those pennies add up, and compound interest is really going to multiply a lot. And then for the guys that have want to say older, but
More
experienced, more mature, just because maybe you can't do the 300, 400 pound bench press or the big, loads that you used to do, you can still train, and let's face it. I mean, that says a lot right there. I see people all the time are missing one arm, or they're missing a leg, and they wish that they could do some of the things that we do. You can still train. You can still train. You can still get in the gym. You can still move some good loads. I would be willing to bet loads that probably the majority of the people that are your age and the people that are in your circle of friends can't do. Be wise about it. Auto-regulate loads. We've got all this volume that we need to get done. Get the reps. Get the reps in. Get the work in. Let's always remember that there's tons of different loads that we can use to get those reps in and still, live that life.
That's good, Brad. Thank you. Jeff?
I'll end on one story because Brad reminded me about that. He gave me a good perspective is that, for older or whatever, like I'm complaining about my low performance or whatever. There's someone else out there that can't even walk.
Yeah.
And I remember in 2014, I was doing a lot of cardio. I was just walking outdoors. And I used to go up on behind my house. There's levees and trails. I walked those trails. There was this little old lady that would walk every day. She was I would say she's probably in her 70s. Super slow. She's got her cane. And you can tell she's in pain. But every day she's out there walking. And I'm like, I used to just think like, because I'd see people on Facebook or whatever complaining about missing lifts and this and that. And I'm like, this lady's out here walking with a cane every single day in pain, and she ain't complaining.
Hey, and there's a lot of 7-year-olds that can't walk.
Exactly.
Because they don't do that.
So it's a good perspective. So anytime you feel like, okay, I can't do the things I used to do, or I'm not hitting big numbers anymore, or I'm aching a little bit, there's someone else out there that's far worse than that. At least we're in their training.
Yeah.
So that I can, from that perspective, it kind of keeps things in check. And I can be at ease a little bit more at peace. So thanks for the reminder on that, Brad.
Yeah, you're welcome. And think about. I mean, I don't know about you, but I admire that lady.
Yeah.
Talk about discipline.
She's still out there because I walked before the weather got bad. I was out there walking. She's still out there. This is like almost 3 years later.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about beast mode.
All right. Well, thanks for talking to me, guys. Talk to you next week. See ya.